In yesterday's video, we went over how Bitcoin was likely to continue to the downside based upon yesterday's news event with the jobs report coming out. And indeed, the button was pressed, the nuke was dropped, and very hot. And in today's video, we're going to be going over, of course, what to expect next, how bad this can get, and continue to update on this particular trade setup right here, which you can't see because there's a nuclear explosion going off in the background as of right now. But before we get into that, I should once again let you know that you can still get 20% off on all of the programs and services that we do have in the Teachable School below, which is in the description, with the code BDAY in all capitals for the next couple days here. And also the Krown Quant automation will actually not just be 20% off, it'll be 80% off. So you can try it for a very, 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 very low dollar amount, and you'll be able to set up, situations like this where you can actually have the bot trade for your own behalf. So you can quite literally make money hands free, although you will have to become a trade strategist, but that is what our strategy sort of templates are for. Anyways, I suppose we can just actually start right here. This trade, again, continues to be the gift that keeps on giving. And in this case, we did see that the entry on, it was Wednesday's open at $58,000 continues to, well, go to the downside. And as long as Bitcoin is riding that red 5 exponential moving average that my cursor is currently on right now, this trade will remain open and potentially with, lower prices inbound. Now, I should remind myself that when we go into the actual strategy statistics right here and into the performance summary, we can see that the average winning trade has been about 9%, around about 9%. And to be fair, I think that we have actually seen about a 9% move here. So let's just see from top to bottom, from entry to wick low. Yes, there has been actually an over 9% move here. So, this could be an early indication that perhaps this trade is, likely running out of steam. But hey, it will remain open from this algo's perspective as long as Bitcoin is again below that red 5, which has now moved down all the way to 55,700. And I suspect that, we could very easily see a short-term bounce kind of where Bitcoin is right now. I'll be going over a little bit later. But yes, this one, continues on, and well, that's what it is at the end of the day. So moving on from there, I do want to once again remind myself that yes, September, until we're into like the mid portion of September, it's just not wise or not statistically wise to be looking for the low, so to speak. So while Bitcoin could very easily bounce here, I still would express a little bit of reservation, at least for one more week, as we can see that the average September low occurred about almost 15 days into the month, and probably a little bit closer to like day number 18, 19, just because that is where we do expect the quad witching event, which typically is a major pivot for price action. So I would still be skeptical. I would still be defensive here for more downside. The question is, how bad can things get between now and then? And does Bitcoin like truly break down to where we see, the last of the 5 handles for a while, which funnily enough, I got a lot of comments about this because I made a comment about a 4 handle yesterday. Apparently, I guess this is maybe not like common knowledge, but 4 handle does not mean 4 figures. I do not think that Bitcoin is going below 10,000, or at least as of right now, it's not my first fucking target, obviously, but a 4 handle just means that the price would start with a 4 in comparison to right now where it starts with a 5, right? And, about a month ago, it always started with a 6, but that is what it is. Anyways, moving on from there, I did want to also go into or revisit our September statistics for the actual month. And it is shaping up to be, a negative month, as September typically is, a little bit over 30% probability to close positively for September, that is. But the average return, the average loss percentage for those losing Septembers has been about almost 13%. So putting that into perspective here, let me find a monthly chart. Here we go. Boom, we can see that from September's open to the current low, that is about a 10% move. So we're quite close to that already. For reference, if Bitcoin were to play out a nearly 13% move to the downside, it would put it just above about $51,000. So again, it's very delicate right here. It's like I don't want to get too bearish because I think that the timing of this move is like a little bit suspect and things like that. But I will continue to remain more or less defensive and likely downside angled, again, as long as Bitcoin is closing or trending below that red 5 moving average, especially on the monthly, but even on the weekly and the daily as we look to over here, the daily obviously representing the more immediate move. So, until Bitcoin starts to reclaim those, Yeah, I mean, it is more likely to move to the downside than not, and these are concerning things, obviously. And you can see how quick, some of these things do start to fire off. And it's funny, looking back in hindsight a little bit, just because I got so much shit about, looking at the red 5 now. But look, simple things like this typically do work out, or at least more or less on the whole. So just another iteration of that. And I expect that the more, thinking people, the non-lobotomized people probably understand quite well. Anyways, yes. Also on that note, let me find this chart right here. We can see, if it actually loads, which it now has, that the weekly time frame is now resting right on that green moving average, which is the weekly 55 exponential moving average. Typically speaking, I do have an issue getting bearish into that, especially on the first test. This is not the first test, however. This is the second test. So this, theoretically could have the juice to actually break down. And I would even go as far to say that if Bitcoin is going to break down, it probably does come from this current move after maybe a little bit of a weekend bounce. And a weekend bounce can very easily bring things back up. Well, with the way that CME closed Friday, not great, but could bring it back up to like the mid 55 region. But that doesn't really do anything. And in fact, just from the short term, as long as Bitcoin is especially below, let's call it $56,000. There's no real concern of like a big bounce, until this trade is closed right here. I would just not even look at that as like a consideration. But going back into it right here, I did want to present this to you as well, just because I think that this is rather enlightening, and I try to do this. From time to time, and it is quite literally this, just flipping the chart upside down. This is CME, by the way. It did close Friday, the week on its lows. If you're just looking at this chart right here, I mean, it's hard to argue that the trend is not your friend in this case. Of course, Bitcoin did have a nice bull trap that we did see in late August. And bull traps are, they're meant to catch people into moves like this. Of course, even on my channel, I was getting bullish on a move like this as well. You're supposed to, because technically speaking, it is correct. But the reason why it is a trap is because it fails from there. And in this case, Bitcoin coming back down. I mean, this next week is going to be fraught with peril. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, in the case that I'm trying to create here, is that if Bitcoin's going to break down, we would expect a continuation next week, very, very likely. Moving over here into our stochastic momentum charts, even just starting with the daily, and then we'll work our way up. But I want to remind myself, daily time frame continues to remain positioned to the downside as long as Bitcoin's below 57,200. So it's going to open up down very likely on Monday. I mean, obviously Bitcoin could have a bounce to there over the weekend, but I think it's a little bit less likely. The 2-day time frame freshly crossed down intra-week last week, and $58,000 is the pivot as of right now. I believe the 3-day time frame also is doing the same thing here too, at 59,150 is a current pivot. And I just want to make a note of this as well. I think it's best seen on the 2-day time frame. When you see something like this, where it initially pops up around the neutral zone and then turns, not necessarily to the downside, it could be to the upside as well. We could just flip this around here and it'd be the same sort of analysis. Those are usually strong moves. And in this case, it would be a strong move to the downside. And then, of course, if we go up to the 5-day time frame, it's actually looks almost the exact same as the 2-day time frame. 59,200 is the current pivot, and the weekly time frame obviously going to be opening up to the downside as well next week, with 62,400 as the failed pivot for this week's momentum. In fact, again, I'll draw a trendline regression from these last few major lows. These are lows from the last couple of years, actually, and this trendline regression very likely does get tested. And we very likely do see a big bounce around this region, but as you can see, it's going to take 1, 2, maybe even 3 weeks to test this. So how far do things come down in the meantime while that's doing that is the real question. So, the next sort of major, the next line of defense that I'd be looking for if I was a Bitcoin bulla here is, again, that weekly 55. Does it provide the impetus for a bounce? Probably yes. Does Bitcoin fail that bounce after it tries for a bounce? Maybe close to 56, perhaps yes as well. But that would be the next major area, $53,000. That was also one of our technical areas of interest from this setup over here. And, if that does fail, so actually I'll present it this way. this would be like the last line of hopium, at least in my opinion, for Bitcoin, pulling itself up by its bootstraps. If Bitcoin does fail this region right here as well, the worst case scenario I do believe is still going to be related to the Bitcoin production cost value, just because we have really not seen the lower boundary of this channel ever, violated for especially like a long period of time. And as of right now, that's about $10,000 lower at $43,000. Now that can change as price action does move around, but I would suspect that it doesn't really go like significantly lower. I mean, maybe I could see like, I don't know, 38 or something like that. But, that does seem to be a target that many people are looking at. I would probably at least give this area a chance here first. Yes, CME did close the weekly very fucking ugly, no doubt about that. I haven't even checked on the HPDR. Let's go check on this. I fear what it's going to be saying is the real analysis here. But yeah, closing cleanly below, I should add, that 61.8 level on new lows on a closing base. If we go to a line chart as well, I mean, that's, if we're going to see lower, next week would be a great week to do it. Maybe after a very short-term rally somewhere into like the mid $55,000 region. But again, as long as Bitcoin's basically closing below 56, all bounces are just that, bounces before likely continuation. And I think that is perhaps the best place to leave off on this particular video. As always, I want to wish you the best of best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully next time.